With the 2020-21 recruiting class coming down to a slow and grinding halt with one major prospect on the board with L.J. Johnson and a few defensive linemen that are still to get scuffled into the fold, the 2020-22 class is off and soaring and flying high. And flying high it is with 2020-22 prospect Evan Stewart possibly coming to the 40. We'll be talking about that in video. Plus, we have a new, well, not necessarily a new offer, a new re-offer from Fort Bend Marshall, Chris Marshall, wide receiver, making a wild and major impact in the 2020-22 recruiting scene. But holla at you, boy. I'm your boy, AK, and I'm back here with another video with you today. If you do like this kind of sort of content, I talk about football recruiting, Texas high school football, college content of all sorts, and of course I do specify in the Texas Longhorns. And in this video we'll be talking about L.J. Johnson, the 4 top prospects on the board in the 2020-22 recruiting class. But let's get this one started out with Evan Stewart. And if you don't know who Evan Stewart is, he is going to be my #1 rated prospect at wide receiver for the 2020-22 class. And what's the big scene? What's the big deal? How come I'm making this video? Well, he meant on social media yesterday saying, and I quote, "Thank you to all the coaches that believed in my talent and gave me a chance, but my recruitment is done." And in that statement, he did end it with an emoji with a handshake and a couple of hearts. And that handshake made me think, did Evan Stewart just give her a silent commitment? Is there some sort of silent commitment going on behind the scenes that we don't know about? Which made me to leave this video. And talking about Evan Stewart, let's just talk about, like I did say, he is #1 receiver in the class of 2022 in my personal opinion. Evan is ranked 40th nationally and is the 6th wide receiver in the nation and is 8th player overall in the great state of Texas. He had a great season this past season. He got 913 yards receptions, 9 TDs on 40. He got 913 yards on 46 receptions for 9 touchdowns. Excuse me, sorry about that. His career totals are going to be 1,670 yards with 89 receptions and 16 touchdowns. But the numbers absolutely do not do him justice, without a doubt. He is a true Z, outside the numbers burner. He can absolutely play in the slot as well. Speed is what you think about whenever you think about Evan Stewart, and he shows that speeds on all 3 levels. He shows it near the line of scrimmage. He shows it in the intermediate and out routes. And of course, holla at you, boy, Evan can take the top off the defense with showing that speed on the deep routes. In addition to be a 4-star athlete in football, Evan Stewart holds personal best in the track in 10.74 in the 100, absolutely blazing speed. Of course, he doubles that up in the 200, running that in 21.8 seconds. Of course, with that speed, he can jump. In the long jump, he holds 24 feet, 6 foot inches. That's jumping some long distance. And of course, he triples it up with the triple jump with a personal best, personal record there of 47 feet. 9 inches. So Evan Stewart is an all-around great twitchy athlete that is explosive with that speed, and that track speed and explosiveness does apply to the football field. So Stewart has, as a prospect, he does apply much pressure on DBs with that speed. He gets on top of them very, very quickly. He does cut down that technique that they do try to use to stay in that hip pocket, and that speed does turn and burn, and he does shake loose of most high school defensive backs. In the 3-cone drill, where I do not have any specific times, he would be an absolute monster in the 3-cone drill. So on the outside, in personal space in the slot, Evan Stewart is going to be an absolute monster on the collegiate field, and hopefully is an absolute monster on the 40 acres for the Texas Longhorns. So let's move on to the saga that is going to be L.J. Johnson. Of course, L.J. did have a trip to TAMU University just a few weeks ago, a self-guided tour. We're supposed to do the same kind of sort of tour on the University of Texas and Austin just this past week. He did have to cancel that, but he did reschedule another one. With that does show interest that L.J. Johnson does have much interest in the Texas Longhorns. To me, I don't understand why LJ hasn't committed already. I know that he does want to make that long commitment. He does know that it is a 40-year commitment, not a 3 or 4 year commitment. So he is very much looking down the future on that. But if he would have done so, and if that choice would have been the Aggies, I think he would have already done so already, right? So what the Aggies do have going for them, and I made a whole entire video touching based on that, but they have a stronger offensive line this past season, and they have a stronger offensive line coming in the 21 recruiting class. Bijan Robinson is just going to be a sophomore and is going to get the lion's share of the carries. And LJ knows this coming in. But to me, LJ still wants to be a Horn. LJ Johnson has a great, outstanding relationship and believes that Stan Drayton will develop him as a football player and as a man both on and off the field. And I think that is 100% key in this. I believe he prefers the city of Austin to College Station. That way, I believe in my heart of hearts that LJ Johnson will be a Horn. So I am previously had about a 60-40 in the fact that Aggies would be landing LJ Johnson. But now I'm thinking the stamp of approval and I'm putting in my crystal ball the call for LJ Johnson to the Horns. So like I did say previously that we do have a new re-offer out on the table, and that is going to be Chris Marshall. And of course, Chris Marshall is going to be out of Fort Bend High School, which is going to be in Missouri, Texas. He is 6'3", 195 pounds. Like I said, he does play football for Fort Bend High School. He's a 3-star right now, but don't you worry about that ranking as he is rising nationally. He is 408 rising nationally currently. He is 51 in the great state of Texas, and he is ranked 61st receiver overall. Like I said, don't worry about these stats. His numbers are off the charts for his one junior season that he did play, and that is why he is not ranked very high, for he only played 1 year in high school thus far. He only played his junior season since he's a class of 2022 guy. Mainly before this, Mr. Marshall, all he really did was focus on basketball. All sources say that Chris Marshall before this was just a really focusing his priorities on basketball. But now, since football has making a turn in his life, the University of Texas is making a high major priority for Mr. Marshall. So something to look forward to. I know he's not one of the big major names that everyone is looking forward to seeing. I know everyone's thinking that we're getting these big major 4- and 5-star receivers. This guy, he ended up being one of these, but he is what Sark is looking for. I have not evaluated his film yet to quite put him on my personal rankings, but I do know that he is up high on the Texas board, so he might be up high on my board one day. But I was alluding to that massive production earlier, and he did have massive production this year as a junior. He had 45 receptions for just over 1,000 yards. He had 1,009 yards receptions. But man, he blew it up. Not much defense being played on him apparently, or easily can make separation and make big time plays as he had 18 touchdowns. So Chris Marshall holds currently 13 offers from other major Division I schools, including 3 in the Big 12. So with all this top of wide receivers, with all the wide receiver talk that's been going on, I decided to make a list of my top 4 that's going to be on my board. Number 1 is my number 1 overall, and of course is going to be number 1 on the Texas board, and that's going to be Evan Stewart, and that's going to be for every single reason that I mentioned above. His electric playmaking ability, his electric speed and elusiveness. I'm very much looking forward to getting this young man on the 40. Number 2 is going to be CJ Williams. Sark has already been flexing his West Coast muscles, his West Coast ties from this modern day product. CJ Williams, of course, you don't know much about him, is 6'2", 195 pounds. He is from Santa Ana, California. That's why I was talking about Coach Sark flexing his West Coast muscles. He is the 39th ranked 4-star and nationally, and he's 4th rated overall receiver overall. But in addition to be a high praising receiver, is that he has been showing much interest in the University of Texas program since Sark has arrived on the 40. So that's why I do have him ranked number 2, as I pretty much will have him in number 3, Kevin Coleman, who's going to be my next one ranked basically the same. I basically have CJ Williams just a little bit higher up on my board because he's a little bit higher up on, we're a little bit higher up on his board. You know what I mean? I guess one of those things, he's scratching our back, so I'm scratching his back a little bit. But talking about Kevin Coleman, my number 3 guy on the board, he is going to be 5'11", an absolute freak, an absolute burner. He's going to be coming from St. Louis, Missouri. He's a 5-star, as he is the number 3 rated receiver overall. Which leads me to my 4th guy on the list, but number 1 in my heart, really, because I've been all over this guy since I first started out my channel back in March, is going to be Brennan Thompson. And then when you think about Brennan Thompson, you think about speed, and more speed. I talked about Evan Stewart being fast. Brennan Stewart would beat him in a foot race, no doubt, as Brennan is the fastest recruit in all of the 2020-22 cycle. I know I put a couple too many twos in there, but that's not really that big a deal. So who's going to be on your top board? Who do you have as your number 1, 2, 3, 4 wide receivers? That's going to be mine. Of course, Texas, we already have Armani Winfield already committed in the 2020-22 class. Again, with the too many twos. Leaving Chris Marshall exempt from this list out of my top 4. I personally have not seen much on him and do not have much evaluation to put him in my top 4. What do you think of the LJ recruiting saga? Do you think it'll finally come to an end? And of course, we all want him to be a Horn, but where do you think LJ will? In doubt, why? With that being said, keep your head in a swivel, your eyes on Texas. Hook 'em up.
Rage on that beat, gon' crazy. Rage on that beat, gon' crazy.